She did this thing once where she said the really great stories are the ones where you can describe it in like one paragraph, you can describe it in one line, and you can describe it in one word. Okay, and I was like blown away by that. I was like, really? She's like, yes, because at the heart of it, the mistake that people make is when you try to describe a story in one word, they put a cognitive word in there, right? Like growth or, something like that. But the actual and the greatest stories, the one word description is usually an emotional word.
Hello and welcome to Your Heart's Content, a show where we try to analyze the parts of content that really matter. We talk to musicians, artists, illustrators, designers, stand-up comics, folks in the business of content, all in a bid to try and understand this space of content a little better and how you could benefit from it. In this episode, we speak with Praveen Gopal Krishnan, or PGK. PGK is the COO of the Ken, but he actually also writes a very insightful newsletter for them called The Nut Graph. What I really like about the conversation with PGK is actually not just the discussion about the business of content, but how journalism itself is a product, or the fact that writing fiction or cinema is actually not very different from writing a business story. Now, if this is surprising to you, I assure you that you will enjoy this conversation. So let's tune in. Praveen, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making it. But this is a serious podcast.
Okay.
And you are a serious COO of a serious business publication. You have to tell me about the Twitter account Silkboard Junction.
Okay. All right.
We put the zingers right up front.
Yeah, I was told that this was going to be a very hard-hitting interview.
It is.
And the
Silkboard Junction is no joke.
Yeah.
This people from Pune don't know anything. We are people who live in Bangalore, right? We understand what Silkboard Junction is. It's a phenomenon in itself, and I want you to elucidate on that.
Okay. So, clearly you have very good sources, Utsav. Okay. But I think so the story is essentially this. Around 10 years back, when I used to stay in JP Nagar in Bangalore, I used to commute to work, which was in Outer Ring Road, and I would cross Silkboard Junction every single day. And remember, this was a time before Bangalore traffic became the meme that it is today. At that time, I was one of those silent sufferers, and nobody was there talking about it, and I felt like this deserved a wider audience. So I created a Twitter account called Silkboard Junction, where I thought that what if this junction had feelings, because junctions can be people too.
Yeah.
And junctions have desires, junctions have feelings, junctions have,
Dreams.
Okay.
And in this case, it is a sapiosexual as well. We did our research.
Yeah. And it could have ambition also.
So I created this account and I just basically started putting one-liners about tech stuff that was happening in Bangalore. It was almost like a tech satire kind of a Twitter account. Surprisingly, it blew up. I ended up getting followed by, I think, the deputy CM of Karnataka. The police commissioner of Bangalore was following me at one stage. So all of this starts happening and I was terrified because I didn't tell my identity at any point in time. In fact, only very close friends of mine knew about this. But
Should
then
we edit this out?
No, it's fine. It's okay. Then the copycats came. Then other people started creating things called Sony Junction, Tin Factory Junction. So multiple junctions started coming up on Twitter. And this was also the time, if you remember, Bangalore traffic police were really big on Twitter. They were basically putting up updates saying that, there is one lorry that is broken down at Kundanali Gate. So please stay home or take this other route and go. So it was just this weird stuff. So I started doing this just as a way to parody it. So it was fun. It was nice. One of those few experiences that I had nice experiences in my life. It was fun.
And I mean, if you think of it, that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? So the fact that, there is Sony Junction and Tin Junction coming up, did they actually reference you very openly, or it was more like, this is a phenomenon now, so we're just sort of replicating it?
Yeah, so a lot of people knew that Silkboard Junction was the OG.
Original. OG.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm using the terms. You're using that's the OG. But the other junctions were actually a little sad because they tried to make these jokes, but those jokes are very cringe. But the one thing that happened as a result of all of this was Silkboard Junction becomes that cultural phenomenon in Bangalore. And I would like to believe that it started here. Like before that, it was like one of the 7 or 8 places in Bangalore that was like really painful. Much later, there was a Reddit post that somebody sent me, much later, like a few years later, where this person wrote this very evocative thing on what it is like to be stuck at Silk Board Junction, right? And the last line, it's actually very evocative. I mean, it's very funny, but it's also very evocative because at the end of it, like he writes about, I'm assuming it was a he. He writes about what it is like when you wake up, you go there and you're sitting there and you're wondering what you're doing with your life. Then you go to office, when you're coming back, it's raining and you're there and you want to go back home. You want to study for CAT. You want to be that writer. You want to be that creator. You want to do all of those things. And the last line of the post was, but all your dreams are stuck at Silk Board Junction.
Wow. That must be satisfying.
That was very satisfying. I killed so many dreams.
In a strange kind of way, today, of course, there is Peak Bengaluru on. Sort of like you think this influenced that and opened the gates for this kind of very Bangalore techie kind of humor.
Yeah, I think it was inevitable. It was going to happen regardless, especially because Bangalore, Twitter, like it kind of was going to happen regardless. I think the thing that was different though is that I didn't do it for any, like I imagine if somebody had done it recently or now, it would have become no disrespect, it would have become a content creator, it would have had brand endorsements, it would have had like collabs, it would have had drops. Okay, I did none of that. I was just like, this is just one random thing I'm doing. In fact, very honestly, I have forgotten the password to that account. I don't even think I can recover it. I mean, I went to Twitter sometime back, a few years back, and I was like, oh, I should see if I can restart it. And I'd hit forget password and went to some other email. I don't know if I have access to that email. So in many ways, the Silk Board Twitter account is exactly like Silk Board Junction.
Wow.
This is too meta, too early in the conversation, guys. Let's just call up the conversation. Only so much insight we can bring in at this point.
We called him for a podcast, but a reel will have to do
For now.
But I think that segues quite nicely into what kind of comes later, which is
So, when I see that kind of, if you go back and look at the tweets to those who are listening, that kind of humor which you have on that, and what you did with the Ken, the first thing you did with them, even when you were, I think, probably still at InMobi, I don't know, another place, you did this thing about food tech startups.
Yeah.
Right? And that was, I think, actually for the first time, I saw someone do business writing with sort of comic strips or visuals, hand-drawn visuals probably in all likelihood.
Yes.
Hand-drawn visuals. So that humor was clearly translating, right? But how did that entire thing happen with you being at, at InMobi and then writing for the Ken? How did that entire journey happen?
So I'll be very honest, okay? So the thing is, it actually, I don't know if it is a lot of creation, at least for me in this case, it was born out of frustration. It was born out of frustration, not about my work. My work was fine. I mean, I enjoyed what I was doing at InMobi. It was great. It was fun. It was all great. But my frustration came because, remember, this was around 2015, 2016, right? Now, 2015, 2016, the business media at that time in India, well, it's actually not very different from the business media today, is completely focused just on two things. They were either focused on layoffs or they were focused on funding. And that's it, right? So all stories were one of those two things. And because I had worked earlier at Myntra, I had worked at InMobi at that time, and I knew that it is much more interesting than that. And things are actually very, very dynamic, and there is a great story that has to be told, but nobody was telling that story. And I knew nothing about food tech. Literally, I knew nothing. I was a complete, utter outsider, but all I was doing was looking at it from the outside and saying, wow, this is actually quite interesting. There is so many reasons here why food tech is a lot of fun, but nobody is telling that story. And so I said, okay, I want to write this. And then I think I was like, of course, like everything in the beginning, I'm sure you teach this as well, like all creation in the beginning, you end up sounding a lot like others before you find your own voice. And that's exactly what happened. Because at that time I read, like, I was reading a lot of XKCD, I was reading a lot of Wait But Why by Tim Urban. So all of those early influences sort of like was there. And I said, look, I will tell the story. I will tell the story while trying to combine these two and write it in a narrative form. And I was just very fortunate that the Ken basically said they'll carry it. I was supposed to do it for another publication.
Okay.
But then I ended up connecting with Rohin, who's now the CEO of the Ken, when they had just started the Ken, to connect me to that other person. That person never replied to my email. And then, of course, then later Rohan reached out to me and said, what did you want to do? I said, no, I had this idea that I wanted to do. I explained the whole thing. I was like, it's all about food tech. It's a little bit like GIFs and stick figures, and I will do this, and I will make jokes. I'll make fun of Donald Trump. At the same time, I'll have some jokes in here. And he listened to the whole thing and said, okay, write it for us. And I'm like, who is us? Because the Ken hadn't launched then.
Okay.
And then he said that we're planning to launch next month, and we'll launch in like October. So why don't you write for us? We are going to be a subscription publication, a lot of gravitas. We are going to be, expect like people to pay for it, and it's going to be like no discounts, and we're going to be cutting edge investigative journalism. And I said, sir, boss, this is just nonsense. I'm just writing nonsense, flippant nonsense. Your subscribers will call you and ask you for your money back. You'll have to give refunds. Okay, don't do this. He's like, no, send it. It's okay. I said, okay, fine. I'll send it to you. So I sent it to him. And then he was like, wow, this is fantastic. Let us run it. I said, okay. I mean,
Your
this
publication.
is your publication.
Your money.
Yeah, your publication, your money. And then he was like, okay, fine, we'll run. I said, okay, run. But they ran it and it worked out very well. And of course, Rohan and the Ken being Rohan and the Ken, extremely like, of course, now I work there. But then at that time also, they reached out and they were like, okay, can send us an invoice because we typically pay contributors this much per word and all that.
Yeah.
I never sent that invoice. All right. And he would keep calling me every 2 months saying that, where is the invoice? I was like, it's fine, never mind. Because I never really did it for the money. I just did it just for fun. And I had a fairly comfortable job. So I was like, it's okay. But then, of course, that was the start of the conversations that led to eventually me joining the camp. So,
Yeah. So, I'm just thinking of this, right? That this kind of a connection, right? That, I have this idea and I'm just going to try it for fun. And then it gets, featured in a publication and they can had a pretty good launch, right? Like they did get a lot of traction and they started out.
Yeah.
How did it feel at that point that suddenly so many people are, seeing what you have created literally for the first time in the context of what you created?
So there is a larger background to this. Okay. So I'll tell you the larger background, the longer background. So the longer background is the following, which is that, and again, this is probably really bad advice because you're doing a show with like creators and all of these people. But I imagine many people go through this similar emotion, right? Which is that I used to write when I was a kid, right? And I know a lot of people tell the story, I used to write when I was a kid. I used to write short stories. I used to do that. I did all of that when I was a kid. I used to write for some publications. In fact, some of the very publications that Chuck knows about. All right. In fact, we probably have written together and probably it has been published adjacent to each other in the same magazines in the Gulf. We just have to find those magazines, but
we already spoke to somebody else about Young Times. If that is what you're talking about.
So there is a Young Times alumni network here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Never thought that this would emerge. But
Yeah, there is a Young Times alumni network here. So I used to write for Young Times at that time in the Gulf. And then after that, I went to engineering. Now in engineering college, the only writing that I did was I started getting into theatre. So I got into theatre completely and I started writing plays. I wrote like these one-act plays. I wrote completely I started off by adaptations, but then later I started writing my own plays. And that was fun. And then after that, I said, wow, this is so nice. And I moved to Chennai. I started working for one of those massive, companies, which are service companies. And over there, what I did was, I said, okay, this is not fun anymore. Let me see what I can do. And I started working for the Economic Times in Chennai. And when I started working for the Economic Times in Chennai, I was literally a stringer, kind of a freelance kind of a role. I wasn't really full-time on their roles. But then my journalism career ended very suddenly and violently because, and I've told the story before, because I got sued for defamation for something that I wrote. All right. It was a very tame piece. All right. It was nothing controversial at all. All right. It was
This
just
nice and simple looking man was sued for defamation. You would think he has had a very boring life, but clearly we see here what's happening.
I mean, if you just take some things out of context, like sued for defamation followed by deputy CM,
and police commissioner.
So.
Yeah, so that happened. And then, and of course, I mean, eventually it all was settled out and all that. But I had it left a very bad taste in my mouth. And I was like, I'm not doing this nonsense again. This is done. My writing career is over. And then I came to Bangalore and I started doing this really, really tech stuff. I started working at a startup here in Indiranagar, which was a handwriting recognition company. I used to work on handwriting recognition, machine learning, AI before it was AI. Okay. It was not that cool back then. So I did all of those things. And then I was like, okay, this is done. But I always wanted to work for a media company and build a media company, sustainably, partly because of my experience. So I went to IIM Bangalore and finished IIM Bangalore. Even there, I was waiting for a media company to come. In fact, I troubled my placement committee. I said, get a media company. I want to work there. I don't want to do this consulting, marketing and all. Unfortunately, there were none. And then someone gave me this advice and said, you know what, just go and figure out the internet, because whichever media company emerges and comes is going to be an internet company. It's not going to be print. So you might as well figure out how to do things on the internet. You might as well figure out how to do things on mobile. So that's how I went down Myntra, InMobi, etc. But the reason I'm telling this entire story is because during this entire time where I was there, where I had almost like a decade, like the time that I wrote that story, Illustrated History of Food Tech, I don't think I had written anything for almost 10 years, right?
Oh, okay.
And at that point in time, for those entire 10 years, I had this private belief, which was held by only one person in the world, which is me, that I am a writer, right? And nobody else believed it. And it's a completely random thought. I was like, no, I'm a writer. I actually can write. I'm a very good writer. Who said I'm a fantastic writer? So it was that totally delusional thing that you're living with.
I'm the Silk Board of writers.
Of course. I just happen to be stuck there.
Yeah,
But I'm there. I'm a writer. Who said I'm not a writer? In the middle, I started like a couple of blogs. But like all blogs, you try one post, two posts, some musing, some rambling, nothing goes. And then you stop. And then you basically do these small posts on Pagal Guy here, etc. So I never wrote. But I was always convinced I was a writer. So when this came out, when I wrote the Illustrated History of Food Tech, I struggled with it. It took me a very long time to write it.
But it's insightful and a difficult to put together piece, I imagine, with all those GIFs and everything.
Yes, it was very strange because I decided I would do the hardest thing first. I would not start off by writing. I mean, even with Twitter, which is like 140 characters, you can't really write on Twitter and say you're a writer. Okay, so, and we didn't have 280 characters, no Elon Musk back then. Otherwise, it would have been easier. But no, so I did just that. I didn't have blogs, I didn't have anything else. And that's it. So that story essentially sort of gave me that confidence and that belief that actually I can do this maybe. But that's it.
So why did you choose to, just want to click on that a little bit, why did you choose to go down the difficult route rather than just write it out? Was it more like this is a story that is best told through these? Like, did you already have these kind of things drawn out? Or again, was it Tim Urban, XKCD influences that made you go down the slightly graphical route?
I'm trying to think. I think two things, okay? First was, I knew that whatever I did, whatever I wrote, it had to be somewhat clutter breaking. And I knew that. And I knew that I had to break clutter. I couldn't draw. I can't draw for nuts. Even today, I can't draw for nuts. In fact, most of the stuff that I drew it myself. But some of the animations and all, I had to take help from a friend to basically like get it animated as a GIF because I had no idea how to do any of it. So that is one. I think that's one reason. So it had to be clutter breaking, and I knew that I had to say it in a way that was completely distinctive from everybody else. So that's one. The second thing was, I genuinely believed, and I still do to this day, I saw it visually. Like for me, it was a visual thing because at the end of the day, as I kept writing it, I mean, again, I was a very bad writer. So what happened was I had to explain things like hub and spoke model. I was like, look, food tech essentially works this way because there is a warehouse is in the center. The more preparation you have, you can deliver faster, deliver slower. Then I was like, how do I show this? I have to show this, right? I mean, I can describe it, but I'm a bad writer. So it's much better to just draw the damn thing out. So, and of course, again, because it's of work, you're used to standing in front of whiteboards and drawing things.
Yes.
Okay, so that sort of like became a part of the DNA. So I was like, oh, I can do that. I just have to do that. That's all. How hard can it be? So it's a combination of those things that led to that happening that way.
Also, before we move ahead, I think it's clear where he stands on the GIF versus GIF debate. So let's just gloss over that completely. And the ideological divide that exists.
It's GIF, is it?
It's GIF according to me. I don't know, what do you call it?
I call it GIF.
Yeah.
You should call this the name of the podcast. Like that spy versus spy, GIF versus GIF.
Which works only when it's said out, by the way.
And if you have a meta reference, it's called GIF calling GIF.
GIF calling GIF. Karthik is
calling Karthik.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. There's no Karthik here, so it's okay. Yeah. So that happened, right? The entire thing happened, right? And you said that it started a series of maybe conversations.
Yeah.
Were they regular conversations? Were they something which happened just over a spread period of time, or?
Okay, so my boss Rohan is going to hate me for saying this, but it's the truth.
Perfect.
Okay.
This is the kind of stuff I live for.
No, it's the truth. So what happened was, I'll tell you. I wrote the first piece, which is the food tech piece. And then I enjoyed it. And I think the Ken also loved it. And they were like, oh, this is great. It helped us a lot. They got a lot of subscriptions. And I also enjoyed it. A lot of people reached out to me. And then I made the first mistake that all creators make, which is...
Can I do this again?
Yes. Okay.
Because there's a part 2.
There was a part 2 which I did. But then after that, it was like, this is nice. The first one I got out of the way, and I got it out of the way just because like I practically like vomited the whole thing out. Now you are burdened with the idea that, can I do the second one? The second one is in many ways harder than the first one. There's a reason why Arundhati Roy has only written one book. Okay. So I know why. So
and rarely ever is the sequel better than the original.
Exactly, right? And not that I'm comparing myself to Arundhati Roy, but still. Okay, so I was like, I can do a second one. And this was also the time when fintech started getting really interesting because demonetization happened, UPI started coming in. And so I made this like outlandish promise to Rohin, the CEO of the Ken, that I will give you a second piece. And he's like, what is it about? I said, it's going to be about finance and fintech and same visual, this thing. He said, okay, cool, awesome, look forward. And I didn't follow up. And so what would happen is, since you spoke about continuous conversations, what would happen is every 2 months or every month or two, I would just get a call and I know it's from him because I would pick it up and it is just him abusing me and asking me, where is the second piece? You said that you would write something. I said, yeah, I'm working on it. I had done nothing. So it is that same
was
thing.
Was he still asking about the invoice for the first one?
He was asking for the invoice as well. And he was like, why don't you send me the invoice? I said, yeah, I'll send it to you. It's fine. Then he's like, what happened to the second piece? I said, yeah, I'm working on it. It's somewhere halfway there. I'm not getting the storyline properly. I had not written a word. I was like completely locked in. But then, of course, that conversation was just for like a few minutes. I suspect even Rohin knew I had done nothing.
Yeah.
But then, of course, he would start talking. And he was like, oh, what else is going on? Then he would keep talking. So that is how this conversation continued. So he had an excuse to call me because I had made a promise that I could not keep. And I had made a promise because I felt the pressure to make a promise. I don't know why. And after a few months, he would call me. And then one day he called me and I said, before you say anything, let me just talk to you. Forget about the piece. It's not happening. It's not going. Okay. But let us talk, because then maybe I think that I would like to come and work with you. Then he's like, oh, okay, interesting. And that is when the whole thing shifted. And then it was, so basically in many ways, the first piece was like an excuse. And I made a promise. That was an excuse for us to keep talking. And then after that, it was just a great phase. And then after that, I got to know him a bit. I guess he got to know me a little bit. And then that's how the whole Ken thing happened.
No, what I really like about this is that when you do things without an expectation of an outcome, you do not only do some of your best work, you don't know what it will eventually lead to.
Absolutely.
Right? And I mean, and sometimes what happens is it will put you on a path which could completely change your life's trajectory.
That's true.
And I think that is something we also talk about at 6% Club, that, you just put in the hours, do the work, and then let the universe take over.
I'm a big believer of that.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely a big believer of that. Like, I mean, the cliche is the Steve Jobs thing of connecting the dots, right? But I'm a very big believer of that, where you just like do something, just put one out there. Like, that's what we also say at the Ken. Like, just put one out. Like, people come with very ambitious this thing sometimes and say, I want to start a newsletter. Don't start a newsletter. Can you put one blog post? Yeah, I can put one blog post. Put one blog post. Then we'll see what happens. Yeah. So it starts from there, and then you don't know where it goes. There are so many stories of so many products that started off in like all kinds of very strange and very unusual places and just ended up in all kinds of.
And you're talking about products at the Ken.
At the Ken.
Not to mention the subjects that you write about, which could be like, just put something out there and you never know which trajectory it might take. Slack came out of a gaming company, so on and so forth, all those kind of things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, YouTube was not YouTube to be right? So it was supposed to be a dating service.
Yeah, I remember this. I know the Slack story. I also know the YouTube story. There was another one that also did something very similar. Someone used to be a messenger app, but it became something else. But I'm not remembering the details. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of those unintentional pivots that end up happening. Anyway, Nintendo. I mean, never mind. We don't want this to be a promo for the origin of things.
I mean, think of it like this, right? That Silkport Junction pivoted to the Ken.
Oh. Wow. Not kickstarted a career, but
pivoted to a company entirely of a new way of doing business journalism.
One of the tweets that I put out in Silkport Junction that was very popular was that 2 food tech companies are stuck at Kundanali Junction and have pivoted into each other. So I remember that.
So you've been a product manager, right, for a very large part of your career, right? Yeah. Myntra and then at InMobi. By the way, we can cut this out, but which product were you at InMobi on?
InMobi, I was involved in multiple products. We don't have to cut this out. It's fairly something that I've spoken about before, and it's on my LinkedIn anyway. We're just talking about my LinkedIn profile. No. So the first thing that I joined InMobi for was this thing called commerce. right?
Oh yeah, I know commerce.
Yeah, no, you know commerce because it has come back in movie after probably like 10 years.
That's retail commerce actually.
Yeah, but that's very similar. So for all those who don't know, so at that point in time, there used to be this belief, which comes in all ad tech companies every 2-3 years. It's not just a movie thing. All right, where people think, you know what would be really cool? If you could get people to buy things from ads. Because you're making ads
Sure,
to get
yeah.
people to download apps. You're making ads to get people to show brand advertising, like it could be like a Mercedes-Benz or some luxury product. What if they could buy
Shoppable
products?
ads.
Shoppable
Shoppable
ads,
ads,
right?
yeah.
Exactly. So now shoppable ads is like the holy grail. Okay, now you've got me started. Okay, so I have to finish. All right. So shoppable ads are the holy grail because I wrote about this. I wrote about this a few weeks back in my newsletter. That is really the holy grail because the problem with something like a app download kind of an ad is that you can't really control too much who does it, right? And only when they do it, let's say for instance, it could be a really bad user doing it, bad quote unquote. It could be a user who just downloads it but does not pay any money. So the company that has basically paid you for the user to download apps will give you the money, but then is like, boss, you've given me this like really bad user. On the other hand, with brand advertising, it's the reverse. You can show it to the most wealthy and the most affluent person in the world, and the person will do nothing. So, and they're like, okay, now how do I know this person has taken action and it's because of you? Shoppable ads solve both problems at the same time. There is an action that they take, which is a purchase, and there is something that you can attribute and say, oh, these guys did it because of this ad. So everybody wants to crack shoppable ads, right? And every 2 years they do this. So Facebook did this thing called a buy button.
Yeah.
Like 2015, 2016. Twitter did this thing very similarly. I think again in 2015, 2016, again it was a buy button. What if you could put a buy button on a tweet? None of them work.
Yeah, and there was TV integration as well, at least in the US. Like,
Yes.
a Hallmark channel pauses and this
Yes.
exact outfit you can buy and stuff.
Absolutely. So that is the holy grail. So people have been trying to do that every 2 to 3 years. So I joined InMobi trying to do that. I'm pretty sure that going by the cycle by now or in a few years, it'll again be back in some avatar, right? So that keeps happening. And so I joined for that. And then it became very evident and apparent in a few months that this is not going to happen. Then after that, I went and did the most boring thing in the world. I did analytics and big data at InMobi. So it was, so InMobi is an ad network. It's an ad network which has like billions or hundreds and millions and probably billions of impressions that it serves in a day. And you have so many of these signals coming in, multiple data centers, all of these things called Hadoop clusters and all. And here I am, this right brain, relatively creative person stuck analyzing all of these data signals and putting them into like one cluster, putting them into like ETLs and all. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was great fun. So I did that for a long time. So it was very left brain stuff that I did for like several years. Until somebody noticed and realized that this guy actually has some talent that is not this data stuff.
Yeah.
And then they made me the product manager for the front end stuff, which is the self-serve portals, the talking to brands. So it started getting into more familiar territory where I'm like, oh, this is all storytelling only. Okay, great. This stuff I can do. Right. So I went into that area. So then I started doing much better.
Okay. So, product manager for ad tech product, right? To content as product. Right? What has that transition been like and how do you think of content as a product?
So first is, forget the ad tech part, okay? The first thing where I'm going to stop you and I'm going to correct you because I have to do this because I have 55 people at the Ken who are going to jump on me if I don't do this, which is that it is not content. Okay, we don't call it content. Content is the one bad word at the Ken. We never say content. It's either stories or it's journalism. That's it.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So no offense to content creators, but for us it is that way, right? Okay. No, simply because we believe, it's our, again, like I said, it's just our internal belief at the Ken, that we believe that content is something that is much more stark. It's much more like it's a word that does not have any strong emotion associated with it. It's more of a commodity, right? For the lack of a word, just that description of the word for us. I'm not saying that's how it is on the outset. I'm just saying for us. So whenever we talk about things, we always say, this is not content, this is a story. Or this is journalism.
Right.
So it's one of those things that journalists also believe. How can you say we are content? We are not content. We're journalism. Okay, so
it's kind of interesting, by the way. One of the people who we have also interviewed over here, we were having the same kind of debate about content. It is such a like oft-abused word right now, right? And then we like drew the distinction between what is content and what is art. You know, like this like film is not content or a book is not content.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
I see that same kind of argument
absolutely
in some sense.
Absolutely. But to be fair, I will also be equally or not equal, maybe somewhat critical of the other extreme of art, of calling it art as well.
Sure.
Right? Because art just means that it comes back to your question. Art just means that I don't have to worry about its purpose as a product at all.
I'm just putting it
Art
out
for
there.
art's sake.
Arts for art's sake. And that's great. And you should do arts for art's sake. And arts for art's sake is fantastic. But we are not art either.
Yeah.
So for us, it is essentially just very simple. We just say to everybody that we believe that journalism can be a product. That's what it is.
Okay.
How do you make journalism into a product? And journalism as a product is a very interesting thing, because if you see, and this is actually something that happened when I started my early conversations with the Ken, when I met Rohin, the CEO of the Ken, and at that time, he said this to me. He said that we believe that journalism is a product. Maybe he said it because he knew I was a product person.
Manager.
He knew that it would work for me. Okay, but it worked. All right. But the reason I found it so fascinating and so interesting is because those 4 words, journalism as a product, have never been said before in that order ever.
Yeah, and it's not like journalism is a new quote-unquote product in that sense.
Correct.
It's been around for
It's not a new to the world thing.
Yes, because people have always said journalism is a service.
Yeah.
They've never said journalism is a product. They've said that journalism is something that you do in order to help society. Journalism is something that you do in order to question power. Journalism is something that you do to hold people to account.
Or in a much less romantic sense, just move basically what is portable billboards, right? Which
Correct.
is what a large part of printing industry was.
Absolutely. Right? So, print was that, and it was just seen as a service. It's a service that you do. The minute you say this is a product, then it changes a lot of things. It changes, it inverts. All the assumptions that you have made about it are now up for question. For instance, it's up for question now that it's not a service if it's a product. Then it just means that I don't have the burden to, be this thing where I have to distribute it to everybody. I don't have that burden anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have that burden where my purpose is to inform society and have a well-informed society. It's not my burden, right? No product would say that's my burden. It's not my burden that then I can essentially say, I believe that this thing has value. And if this thing has value, then I believe that people should pay for it. So I don't have the burden to decide that or say that, oh, you know what, this is actually this thing, should make it free, because not really. I'm okay with that. Of course, then it's also a burden to try to figure out how to make it accessible and how do you get other people to afford it and buy it just like any other product. That's a different story. But we lose a lot of existing preconceived notions of journalism the minute you define it as journalism as a product, which I think was a lot of fun. And I think it's something that we've kept and stayed true to.
And it's kind of revolutionary forget that time. It's still kind of, that way. That's interesting. Yeah.
But it's a very, very hard ethos. Like it's very easy to say it. It's actually very, if I may say, very sexy to say it.
It is very sexy to say, and I'm actually dying to put together the slide deck for the focus shifts to the consumer and all that sort of thing. And
it's very, very sexy to say it, but I can tell you that every day to live it is extremely hard. It's very, very, very hard to live it, because there are so many things that you need to do when you define it that way. That is very counter.
Was it hard because of the product in and of itself, or was it because of everything externally, like say existing journalists saying, oh, you can't treat journalism that way? Or
I mean, it's a little bit, but okay, I'll give a few examples. Okay, so, and I say this because I have some background as product as well, and I'm here as well. Okay, so I'll give you a few examples. Number one of the things that product management generally teaches you is that don't get too attached to things. Right? You launch a product, doesn't work, it's fine. Okay. You try to tweak it, you try to iterate it, it doesn't work, that's also fine. And if it doesn't work, you kill it. Technology changes, that's life, right? New things come, new paradigms come, learn to adapt. That's what life is, right? And that's how you build products and stay ahead. And that's what every product company teaches, that's what every product manager knows. They don't really question this, that's true, it's part of our DNA, right? That's not true in media companies. Right? And to bring that ethos into a media company is very difficult. So as an example, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we have killed so many products at the Ken, right? And this is something that's relatively unusual. Like I can give you a long list of products that we have killed. We used to have this product called the Ken on Weekends, which was essentially the thesis was that we had business stories that you would write for 5 days of the week. But the last 2 days we would write like these light-hearted, more laid back, almost like a mint lounge kind of stories. We tried that for a year. Didn't work. We killed it. Okay. And there was a lot of angst inside because killing something inside a media company comes with its own baggage of, oh my God, this is a failure. No, it's not. It's fine. It's okay. We'll do something else. Right? So you have that. We have killed multiple podcasts. Okay, so many. In fact, as I'm sitting here, just yesterday, Rohin has killed First Principles, which is one of our leading podcasts.
Didn't expect that happen.
Should we expedite the release schedule?
Yeah. Because I don't know, suddenly they will say we are launching 3 but killing 2.
I like you got a live reaction from you. I didn't know about it. Yeah, but he announced it yesterday. And he's like, I've killed it.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, interestingly enough, remember our conversations. Like they want, like we were in talks to do something, and then things shifted in the space of 2 months, and I was actually a little worried, not for me, but like it seemed like, okay, these guys came up with the idea, and we kind of, it's not like they approached me, or it just naturally happened. And like, will they be okay killing this nascent idea before it was even given a chance out there? And I found the conversation super easy. Like both of them, like Rohin and Praveen, like, things have moved on. It's okay. If you ever think of another idea, let us know. Like, wow, that was the easiest like breakup ever. And
yeah. Because so multiple podcasts, and the thing is that even internally we tell ourselves that it is essentially this thing of kill your babies, kill your darlings. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, it's fine. Everything is going to be okay. But the thing is, the real challenge is that is a very product mindset.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But how do you marry that with the other side? Because at the end of the day, this is a creative thing. You cannot run away from it. Even the reasons for killing First Principles from Rohin's standpoint was, like, he gives his last, like he does a 6-minute thing where his episode called Last Principles, where he says, I'm killing the show, right? I've decided I'm not doing it anymore. He does not say, like a product company would say, oh, or at least they would, they would jump around the whole thing and they would not say exactly why they did it. They'd be like, oh, we basically started this thing. It's time for a new avatar. We're not sure. We're this. They don't give you the exact reason. No one ever tells you why they did it. When a product is killed, no one ever tells you why they've killed it, right? Rohin was very candid. Rohin said, the reason I'm killing this is because this whole thing is predicated on the fact that I need to have honest conversations with people and I need to enjoy this. And I'm not enjoying this anymore, right? So I'm not going to do this. I'll do something else, okay, that I really enjoy, that I'm looking forward to, and I can't wait for you to see it. And that's true. That's true with everything that we do. Every single person, like tomorrow, if somebody wants to kill a podcast at the Ken, they're perfectly okay to do it. They can come in and say, I'm not enjoying this anymore. If I want to kill a newsletter that I'm writing, I can go and say, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I want to kill it. And I don't think we'll face much opposition. But the only questions that will be asked is, okay, fine. I want to kill it, no problem. But what are you going to do now? What's next?
Yeah.
Right? And you have to come in and then argue that, the thing that I'm replacing it with is going to be much bigger and much better than what you're doing right now. Right? So that balance is very hard. Like it's very, very hard to do. But that's the conflict. That's the tension at which the whole thing rests.
And I think the thing about, you said, kill your babies. I think that's actually also probably coming from, anyone who's been a writer long enough, like, whether it is Rohin or other founders of Ken, because they've all done that to their own stories over their careers, right? So somewhere that ethos is clearly translating to say that, I know this line looks awesome, but I'm going to kill it. Similarly, this product looks great on the outside, but if it is not serving the central purpose for it which it was born, we should just kill it.
Yeah. There are parallels, right? So, and there are places where if you merge the two, it becomes very interesting. So here's one place where you merge the two, right? Where you always, generally in media companies, even at the Ken, you always have some kind of a story backlog where you essentially know, what, this is an interesting story. We should write it. It could be about some company. It's not necessarily an investigative story. It's just a different way of looking at the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you say, this is a very nice story. It'll be really cool to write it, right? But you keep it there in the backlog. You keep it there for a week. You keep it there for 2 weeks. You keep it there for 3 weeks. And then you're doing other stuff. And then you come back to it and it's stale, right? It automatically becomes stale. It becomes stale because the world has moved on from the thing that you thought was really interesting and cool
Timely,
at that point
topical,
in time. Yeah, exactly. It was timely, topical, and moved on. And then you realize, I can't do this anymore. It's just not going to have the same impact. So let me not do it. So you don't do it, right? Now that is exactly parallel to what happens in product companies. Product companies also maintain backlogs of bugs and features and all of those things. And one of the things that some companies say, a very radical thing that they say, which is radical there, which is not so radical on the media side, but it's radical there is, hey, whatever backlog you have, right, just purge it every 1 month. Just delete the whole damn thing and start over. Because if you haven't done it in 1 month, clearly that bug is not important.
It's not a P0.
It's not even a P0, it's not even a P1. It's not important. You're not going to do it. When it comes back, you can add it back, right? which is a very radical thing. But a lot of product managers and product companies, no, how can I do that? I have a long list of this backlog. This is my baby. I have to make, no, it's fine. Kill the damn thing. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. So there are lessons on both sides, those parallels that you see.
Yeah, in a very personal kind of way, I've used this philosophy to manage my, I want to say like bookmarks folder.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like in 1 month, if you haven't read this, like at the end of the month, that folder goes. It's dead. Like sure, I might lose a great long read, but it also relieves the anxiety in some way. Like damn, there are like 50 pieces over here. So yeah, that's a like a great philosophy in some way. I want to ask you about the Ken's content in some way. Sorry,
My God,
We have
let the
promo,
man
like,
at least have his coffee.
we have the.
But I have taught you well already.
We
like
have-
one
yeah,
this
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
At least he paused. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
that much
yeah,
credit.
yeah.
No, like, and okay, when I say content,
It's okay.
Ken's
It's
stories
fine,
and journalism.
It's
Ken's
fine.
stories
It's
and
fine. You can
journalism,
say
yeah.
content. It's okay.
No, so two things always stand out to me, right? One is what I want to say is the framing, and the second is, let's call it the tone, right? And the framing it takes off from something that you said, like, can we look at this company in a different way? Can we look at this industry in a kind of different way, right? And to be very honest, I didn't think about it this way until I was eavesdropping on a conversation that you were having the last time I stayed at your place, or the time before that.
very
and-
personal. Okay, I'm
it
finding out
became
new
extremely
things.
personal. Yeah, it became very personal. Also, I couldn't help it because you talk very loudly on the phone. And I'm obviously not going to say what the story, etc. was, but it was very clearly you were talking with a journalist about a story that they had. You were saying, okay, this thing, that thing, and you came up with, and by then I understood what the story was. And I was sitting down and working when you were walking up and down the stairs, talking about this, and then you reframed the entire piece in a completely different way. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not saying that what you said was genius or something like that, although this probably is, but I was thinking, okay, that's a very interesting way of looking at how a story might evolve, right? You do this kind of journalism, and then you look at it from the outside, or whatever, you string these kind of pieces together, and suddenly the narrative itself becomes different, right? So that's one, right? And the second, of course, is a tone, which I think over time, Ken has developed a distinct, I kind of want to say house style.
Sure.
There are different writers, all of which have their own kind of personalities, but there is some sort of it feels like a very, it's not staid. Let me put it that way. It feels like I often say that a lot of the gold standard tone of voice for a lot of companies trying to do content marketing has to be casual Fridays.
Yes.
I think you go a little beyond that. I think I would go to the extent of saying this is what we would say in the early ad days, smoke room conversations. Like that's when you really get, okay, boss, what happened in the boardroom was fine, but now we are actually going to talk about. It feels like it's not that I'm implying that you guys are like a bunch of smokers, but what I mean by that is, like, it feels like casual to the, I mean, it's almost like that casualness reduces the temperature in the room a little bit, and now you're able to say, okay, now let's talk like how we would have a conversation, say, in a bar or something like that. So these are two, I know this is a very long question and possibly a very long answer which will branch off into many places, but yeah, the framing of stories and the tone, both of these, were they deliberately built over time? Were they something that evolved? Are they happy accidents? Yeah.
So it's a good question, right? And I think what I'm really struck by is how you use very like adjacent words to describe something, how I would use it, right? This is absolutely correct. So let me explain. So when you said framing of the story, I'll tell you internally at the Ken how that's described, right? Framing of the story from the outside is like, oh, how do you frame the story? Inside the Ken, the question that's always asked whenever someone comes up with a story is, internally it is, what's the line, right? So that is always the question. What is the line is such a heavy question because it is, you can have all the story you want in the world. And again, this is something that comes in media and journalism because honestly speaking, in most newsrooms, nobody has time. So when someone comes and essentially says, hey, I have the story on this, you have to be able to explain what that story is in like a couple of sentences, right? So when someone asks, what's the line? What they're really asking is that. like what is it in 2 sentences, right? And you have to be
Elevator
able to-
pitch.
Elevator
almost.
pitch.
Yeah, it's almost like an elevator pitch, but there is some nuances. I'll explain. So first is you have to say what the line is, right? So you have to explain the line is this. Then you're like, okay,
But sorry, just one question. When you say the line, do you actually mean the exact framed line or just a thought? This is the broad story.
yeah, it's almost like a working headline.
A working headline. All right.
Okay, it's almost like a working headline. So what you really are saying is what's the working headline, right? And you have to be able to say it, right? If you can't say it, then you would usually get go back. I don't think you have a story. You're not clear yet.
Wow.
Right?
It's amazing that it's really about that thought rather than the
Yeah.
actual journalism, number of companies you've spoken to.
All that comes later.
Because it's
Okay.
almost like you need to have that insight
Thesis.
or a thesis which you have built
Yeah.
up implicitly with your observations.
And now you need to
And now you
validate
need
or
to validate
invalidate
or
it.
invalidate or back
Yeah.
it up.
Correct. Right?
Very
and
nice.
you need to be able to say it in one sentence. If you can't say it in one sentence, then it's probably not a story. Then it's a research report.
Sure.
Right? It's a good
And
thesis.
so many long form pieces are basically
reports.
research reports.
Exactly, right? Because it means that, oh, it's a great thesis on the food tech company in some sector. Cool, good for you. Write it. Okay, or don't write it, mostly. Okay, but what is the line is this thing. Now, we take it one step forward. I'm not saying we do this all the time, but one of the things that one of my writers, her name is Ruhi, who basically runs this vertical at the Ken called the Ken Learning Vertical, where we go and teach storytelling.
Yeah.
Like she did this thing once where she said, the really great stories are the ones where you can describe it in like one paragraph, you can describe it in one line, and you can describe it in one word.
Oh.
Okay. And I was like blown away by that. I was like, really? She's like, yes, because at the heart of it, the mistake that people make is when you try to describe a story in one word, they put a cognitive word in there, right? Like growth or, something like that. But the actual and the greatest stories, the one word description is usually an emotional word.
Wow.
It is a word that is the end of it. That comes to my second point, which you said about how do you get style, and style comes a little later. But the main heart of any story at the Ken is, first question is what is the line? The second question is what's the conflict, right? Now, conflict is a very, very vastly
That's so
understated,
beautiful, yeah.
but also extremely powerful word.
Yeah.
And this happens, okay, whenever I go and teach storytelling, whenever I talk to people, they always shy away from conflict, right? They always think that conflict is something that is to be avoided. First of all, people think conflict means fight. Conflict doesn't necessarily mean fight. Conflict essentially is about, there is a desire and there are obstacles.
Yeah.
What is the desire and what's the obstacle?
Yeah.
That is what it is. It's like conflict is at the heart of any story. Any movie, you don't watch a movie without a conflict.
Yeah.
Right?
In fact, it is one of those 5 or 6 elements of storytelling,
Yes,
right? Plot, premise,
absolutely.
etc. Characters
And
and
you
conflict.
need that conflict to resolve
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
to give you the release.
To
Absolutely.
release,
Yeah.
It's the same
Absolutely.
thing for music as well. We have spoken about this so many times. There needs to be a certain build-up
Correct.
in the bridge for that chorus to feel satisfying and resolved.
Correct. Right. And the conflict essentially is something that very hard to describe, because people
Yeah.
sometimes write in terms of, oh, this is the company doing. Yeah, but what's the conflict? So some of the best stories are, the ones that essentially say it is essentially, and the conflicts are not very different from fiction, even in business writing, but you should know it,
Yeah.
right? It's about a small startup taking on a legacy company. It's about, the conflict could be about this company that is essentially coming into this place and trying to disrupt something that was already established. The conflict could be this company that is essentially trying this abroad in a certain place. It's an adventure. It's going from a familiar place to an unfamiliar place. Sometimes it's going reluctantly. So those are the conflicts. But the best kind of conflicts are the kind where the companies are at war with itself. Why?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
the
Oh,
best
yeah.
stories
Oh
are
my
not
God.
external
Yeah,
conflicts, but internal conflicts.
Yeah, and there is a series of stories you guys have done on a particular edtech,
Sure.
right? Which actually brings out that conflict brilliantly,
Sure.
right? And I think the reason it makes for such great reading, because it actually reads like a thriller,
Yeah.
right? Because there are these 2-3 protagonists and they are trying to pull off things, doing things.
Absolutely.
And and then there is an external party, which is probably a regulator or people who are coming in. So it's like a whole potpourri of things,
Yeah.
boiling pot of things happening in that sort of a environment. And actually, that you're right, it actually makes for a great
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
An ad agency I used to work for also uses conflict in a very interesting way. They call it what's the cultural conflict. that's over here, right? Or cultural tension is what they call it, right?
Tension is also a
again,
synonym,
it's
yes.
almost exactly what you said, right?
Correct.
We want them to do something what's kind of like the obstacle in the way. That kind of thing. It's one of those planning frameworks that you use to come up with your. Again, it's sort of like a thesis again on which the creative can build.
Correct.
And again, I remember sitting in a workshop for that. I was like, okay, conflict means what? Again, is it going to be fight? No, it's just, okay. I like, it could be something like detergent advertising always has to be clean because that's what it is. Or the only dirty thing can be shown before. But
Correct.
cleaning, can we frame that in a positive way? So I get where that conflict is coming from. And it's the heart of good storytelling, whether that's journalism, whether that's good advertising.
Exactly. But this is the missing element that is there in, if you look at say LinkedIn posts.
Yeah.
Okay, as an example.
Yeah.
Right? No, because it's a very instructive thing.
Sure.
Like, why are they so banal?
Yeah.
Why are they so trite? Like, at the heart of it, if you go, it is this.
Yeah.
It is that if you are essentially trying to write all the time about something, about only growth, or only doing something, or only achieving something, it's without, in the absence of conflict, and you don't talk about the conflict at all,
Yeah.
then nobody's going to want to read it.
Yeah.
It does not create any emotional resonance. I'm not saying people won't read. They'll read it and they'll hit some like for you and say, good for you, bro. Okay, but they're not going to have emotional resonance. This is the same reason why VCs in India are never able to make great content. Because they will have their podcast where their VCs sit with the founder. You think the founder is going to talk about conflict? No, the founder is going to talk about how my company is awesome.
Yeah.
India is doing great. We are going to rise. We are going to do this. Everything is fantastic. There's no conflict. In the words of Ruhi, who teaches storytelling, that's like a movie where the first act is boy meets girl and the last act is boy and girl live happily ever after. And she asks, would you watch such a movie? And everyone says no. Why? Because all movies are conflict. You only watch for the conflict. You don't watch for anything else. So conflict is very important in story.
Yeah.
And people run away from it. People shy away from it. They think it's a bad thing. Not at all.
And I think if once you identify the central conflict of the story, it's actually much easier to write that story.
Yeah.
Because you know what to build up to, you know how to bring out that conflict cleanly, and you want to either have the release or say, oh, we don't know where it will go.
Correct. And the thing is, sometimes what happens is the tricky part and the innovation comes in trying to tell that same fundamental conflict in very different ways.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise, the more standard conflicts are like, for instance, David taking on Goliath. Here is a small company taking on a big company. You know, like a underdog
It's
story.
almost like a trope.
It's almost like a trope, right? But now, how do you now try to tell that differently? There are so many underdog stories out there, but there are many variants and interesting ways of telling underdog stories. Sometimes you can do it in a non-linear way. Sometimes you change the order of things. Sometimes you realize it's an underdog story and you go, and later by the end of it, you realize that, you know what, I don't think this underdog is such an underdog after all, right? And so those kind of subversions you can start to bring into business storytelling. But those are the things that, you know, very hard to do and requires a certain amount of sophistication to pull off.
You know, this is an extremely nuanced way of looking at business journalism, especially. Is this something that evolved with time, or is this something that was very clear from the beginning that we want to do this level of, looking at an industry, reframing, or all those things that we spoke about right now, conflict, all this, was this there from the beginning, or were these guidelines kind of developed along the way?
No, I think some of this was definitely, most of this was definitely there from the beginning. I'm just over intellectualizing this a little bit more and putting not frameworks really, but describing it. So actually the words that you see me using to describe it are very theater words. Like, because I understand theater very well.
Sure.
I understand 3-act structures. I understand that. So that's the words I use, right? But that was always there in the Ken, right from the beginning. You can go out to 2016 and you can open the Ken stories, and I can pretty certainly I can tell you that all their stories from then till now have the same stuff. Their edit meetings were saying exactly the same things. What's the conflict? What's the line? What are we doing? How are we doing this, etc. Yeah, I'm just adding this little bit of, from a theater perspective, wouldn't it be cool if you took the second act and you took the third act and you merged them together and you did the fifth act? So those are the kind of stuff that I am adding over here in terms of structure, because I play with structure a lot. But I think the rest of the stuff, at least the fact that we had to write stories that were emotionally resonant and punchy and had a line and had a conflict, was always there. Always there. In fact, I learned more from it than
Were there
anyone
any
else.
other examples of non-traditional structures. Like for example, your first piece for them broke them. You said it right, clutter breaking.
Yeah.
Were there any other examples like that? I mean, not necessarily more comics or graphics in the way that you've done them, but did anyone try something else? And it could be from one of the many products that Ken has tried over the years.
Yeah, several. So, for instance, I'll tell you. So, one of the things that I did was I write a newsletter. It comes out every Saturday. It's called the Nut Graph. So, one of the things that I did for the first 3-4 years was even now to some extent, I just made it my playground. I was like, I'm going to try different things. Not every week, but every few weeks. Something fun I'll do and I'll see what happens, right? So there was and I've done all kinds of experiments. Like sometimes I've written things where I said, okay, let me make the whole thing not very visual, but structural, where I essentially describe the whole thing as here are these, like I write about geo sometimes. When I write about geo, I basically say that there's actually 5 layers to it. And here are the 5 layers, how it's going to be described. So I describe it completely visually and spatially more than anything else. Yeah. So I describe it in terms of space that they're trying to occupy. I wrote this piece earlier this year called The Great Wall of Fashion, right? Where I essentially spoke about the fashion industry in India and how fashion has changed. And the entire metaphor that I use is how there is an entire wall here and all of these companies are against this wall. So very Game of Thrones kind of a visualization. It's like a siege. They are stuck against this wall and they're trying to climb it, but they can't. Because you have geo on the top that is like stopping them from climbing, and you have others at the bottom that's stopping them from going back. So you're kind of like stuck in the middle trying to figure out how do you go up. So very physical, spatial things I use. Again, very theater stuff. I remember Rohin wrote a First Principles newsletter just a few weeks back where he did the entire thing in reverse chronological order. And I remember we were sitting and talking about it, and he said, I did a lot of research on reverse chronological order. There are like 4 ways to do it. One way to do it is completely in reverse, but that just becomes gibberish. The other way to do it is like the Memento style, where the plot moves in reverse, but within a section, it's forward. Right? Then he said the third way to do it is like, where you have forward and reverse happening at the same time. It was a very geeky conversation. We were sitting and having our lunch, and he said, I did a lot of research. And he tried something in the First Principles newsletter a few weeks back, which was completely in reverse. So I did this thing once where I wrote about the Covaxin vaccine, which I really liked, where I basically, I like these internal battles a lot, where I wrote about Covaxin as this weird kind of a character that has both a light side and a dark side. And I said there is a light side and there is a dark side, and both of these are constantly at war with each other, right? So to take a vaccine and make it into a character is a very strange thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So all of these weird experiments I have tried. I've tried so many things.
Yeah. Interesting. The vaccine is a great metaphor itself for internal conflict. If you think about it at a very deep biological level. It seems like there's a certain playfulness with how you approach, certain playfulness and fluidity with which you look at content. Like it's there I go, the third time like this, like I should be ejected. It's not like it needs to be in this regimented format. No. And I think that's a nice kind of lesson to take away, because I feel like many let's call them creators for now get stuck with the format in some way. And at least I would like to think that the format is just incidental and the idea is what you're kind of trying to sell. I mean, sell or say whatever. I assume that resonates. I mean, there's no question here. It's just an observation. Like, it feels like it's very playful. And I think that also makes it interesting for the viewer. Like today when I open the Nut Graph, is it going? What's PGK going to do? Is it going to be a poem? Is it going to be reverse chronology? Is he going to draw again? Or
correct.
I think that's a certain... or is he going to use the results of the survey and do something interesting with that? And I think it makes it interesting. And again, I assume all of this comes out from looking at it as a quote-unquote product rather than a service.
Yes. And honestly, it's about the hardest part, or one of the hard parts you'd imagine, and it's actually very hard to imagine, that is that one of the things I constantly tell people at the Ken is that I don't think you are breaking or experimenting enough. Right? Which is usually the reverse.
Yeah.
Usually in like media organizations and journalism organizations, like, why are you doing this? This doesn't fit the house style. We are a very straight this thing. That doesn't happen a lot at the Ken, quite frankly. Right? It's more of, why are you following this template? Let's break out of this template. And that has happened. So for instance, we have this one writer, Anand, who's a financial reporter from Chennai. Okay. Now Anand is this guy who's basically been at The Hindu for like a long time. right? And he writes these stories just on like public markets, right? Like like how you'd imagine a financial journalist to be, right? Like a father of 2 kids, and he's like there and he's doing all
He's
that.
part of a mold.
He's you would imagine,
Yeah.
right? But one of the things that Anand discovered, or he always had it, was he had a thing for verse, right? He had a thing for poetry. And because you said poetry, so what he does is we write this email in the morning where we basically talk about a story of the day. And sometimes Anand just writes verse. He writes the whole thing as a poem and saying, I think you should read the story for this reason. He writes like a iambic pentameter kind of a verse, and people are like, what is this? This is interesting. What is going on here? So some of the stuff is quite interesting that comes out of it. We had a podcast at one point called Cost to Company.
Yeah.
And it was a podcast about careers, right? One of my favorite episodes of Cost to Company was this one episode called The Product Manager is a Politician, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which was a very interesting episode because what we basically said was product management, a lot of people teach product management through the lens of frameworks and do this, do that, etc. But actually, a lot of it is just politics, right? And that's what people are afraid to talk about, right? Nobody says that it's about politics, right? And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It is it, right? And the reporter Sneha who told that story, she begins that story with some historical event and a battle in some place in Bengal. And you're like, where is this going? But then you realize, this is where it is going. The whole thing's about a product manager and politicians, and starts there. So some of the stuff was like quite nice.
This I completely identify with because I use some sort of this storytelling on my own podcast that it starts somewhere and ends elsewhere.
Yeah.
But what I really like about it, and I think of it, is you guys have directive principles, if I use a constitutional term.
Sure.
But because they are directive principles, they are not bound by a certain style / format / rule book.
Yeah.
My question, which I want to sort of segue into, is that you've done theatre, right? So you understand that formats are different.
Yeah.
Correct? Like film and theatre are completely different formats.
Yeah.
The same way writing a story versus a podcast are different formats.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do you approach, for example, this same person, let's say, who's doing a story, pitches an idea for a podcast episode, let's say. I don't know if that's the process. Might be have a different process. Right? Does it work differently?
So it's interesting, okay? Because some of the things are different, but some of the things are same. And this comes back, again, I'm doing a callback to Chuck's question where he asked me like 5 minutes back about style, right? So you spoke about style and you said that how you basically do like a smoke room kind of a thing in the advertising side, etc. So at the Ken, the style actually in the writing thing, the general directive principle is that write like how you speak. Okay.
This is great advice.
Right, which is generally great advice. Okay, and a little counterintuitive for people because people tend to write long, loopy sentences, and quite frankly, that's the way you can tell when someone has used ChatGPT, right? No disrespect. So you can look at it and say, this is not, nobody speaks like this, right? So write like how you speak is very, very important, right? Now that is a very good directive principle that translates very well to a podcast as well.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're doing a podcast, and we've done podcast like trials and episodes where the feedback is always, why are you so staid? Why are you so stiff? Why are you speaking to me from a place of expertise, right? Why are you speaking to me a place of drama? You don't just speak normally. Speak like how we are speaking right now. So that kind of stuff translates across both mediums, right? But I think some of the other stuff, don't know. Like for instance, I guess some of the other stuff, we just figured it out as we went along because we just started off a small podcast. We tried it out. We looked at it. We said, okay, now we also learned some things. Then we kept doing. And of course, other people came in. People who have come in with podcast experience figured it out. So some of the stuff was organic and the rules are different in both formats, but some of the rules are the same.
Okay. Now, when I think of the evolution of the Ken, and I subscribed to the Ken when it launched, and I'm still a subscriber, it started with the promise of one story a day.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that has gone to multiple newsletters, that has gone to now podcasts.
Yeah.
And as I'm discovering, podcasts being shut down as well on the eve of the interview. So what I want to understand are two things now, right?
Don't worry, Utsav. By the time this episode is out, maybe the new new podcast will be out. Hopefully.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect. So my first question is that at what is the decision point / subscriber / user insight which makes you say that, okay, we need to start something, solve this particular problem or solve this particular tension or conflict within the mind of so some of them just like the first 2 years, right? I can understand who that is for and what that is for. So some of them are super clear.
Yeah.
For me when I look at it. But there are others which I'm not exactly sure what the thing is. So how does this process work?
Yeah. I'll give you the answer, okay? But the answer is going to be a little surprising. So, and I say this as a product person. We don't index very heavily on customer insight, user insight.
Okay.
We index much more heavily on creator belief and willingness to do things. So what I mean by that is the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons sometimes why we kill product, goes back to my point of why we kill products. If the reason why we kill products is because the people who have created them no longer believe in them, then it stands to reason that the reason we start products is only because somebody has to believe in them, right? There is absolutely, that's a very, very important thing, right? So we can be that organization that becomes very top down and says that, you know what, we have done an analysis and we believe that there is a space for a newsletter about, say, I don't know, green energy. Would anybody like to write a newsletter green? No, let us hire for it. I don't think we don't work that way. All of our newsletters have happened because literally there was a Slack message put out that said, we know the user insight is that, look, this one story a day is not enough. We know that we need to do more. We know that users are asking for more. We know that that is there. So we have to start newsletters. So we then put out this thing that said, who wants to write a newsletter on the topic that you would like? Just put it, right? And many people came. And people said all kinds of stuff. Some people came and said, like for instance, Seema, my editor, came and said, oh, I want to write one on green energy because I'm interested in it. Cool. Then someone else came and said, I want to write on fintech. Cool. One person came and said, I want to write on sports. We've never written about sports since. Why? Because he moved on. He left from the Ken. And that's it. It was very easy otherwise to say, no, we have to continue the sports thing.
Yeah.
We need to hire somebody for sports. No, it's fine. This person has moved on. It's okay. We'll do something else. So a lot of the things that we do, including my newsletter started not because of any customer insight or any user insight or any of that stuff.
Yeah, none of that would have actually led to.
It would have never led to it. It cannot happen, right? So it begins with me wanting to say, I want to do this because I believe in it. Okay? And as long as you believe in it, you will do it.
Which is true because, if someone is driven and motivated by an idea, they will see it through, right?
No, but you'll be surprised that, from your standpoint, it looks obvious because you're talking about individual creators, which is almost a prerequisite. You cannot be an individual creator. You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't love doing what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And I'm sure all the people in 6% Club wouldn't be coming to you if they didn't have something that they enjoyed and wanted to do. But that's not true in media companies. Media companies are filled with products, podcasts, newsletters, things that nobody believes in anymore and is just churned out day after day, week after week, month after month. That is content. So that is what
That is not
happens.
stories and journalism. That is content.
That is content. Yeah, it's really maintained and run by teams who just have inherited it and have been told to do it and are just expected to run it. So they do it.
So when you say that, you stop a podcast or a newsletter when the person doesn't no longer believe in it,
Yeah.
right? Is it a question of whatever fundamental thesis they had when they started, has that shifted? Or they are just not driven / interested in the topic anymore, but the topic still remains as interesting or as it was?
It could be either. It could be because the individual person does not believe in it. It could be the person has moved on. It could also happen because the Ken does not believe in it. It works in the organization side as well. We may have a thesis of starting something. It's possible that the organization believes in something more than the people creating it. It's possible the organization is wrong. I'll give an example. So for instance, we did this newsletter around the time COVID happened, right? It was this newsletter that we call Beyond the First Order. Now,
Yeah.
Beyond the First Order was essentially born from a very simple problem, which is that the Ken published just one story a day at that point in time. So by nature of how we work, our production cycle for a story is somewhere close to 2 weeks, right? Something happens, it takes us 2 weeks, give or take, to report this thing and we publish the story, right? Now, when COVID started, and when COVID hit us, that thing, 2 weeks was a lifetime because things were changing every day, right? And so it became apparent that, you know what, this 2 week cycle is not going to work for us, right? So we have to now create a product that is much more high frequency. So that was a part user insight that came out of it, right? And we basically said, okay, let's do it. And again, very simple. One person said, I'm going to do it. And then they were like, okay. So every day it would be like, hey, we have this newsletter, volunteers. Who wants to write for today's edition? 2 people will come and say, hey, I'll write for today's edition. 2 people write. Next day, hey, who wants to write for today's edition? I'll write for today's edition. So we did that for a year. At some point in time, who wants to write for today's edition?
People stopped raising their hands.
People stopped raising their hands. People got busy. They started doing other things. They started believing in other things. And that's the time that the product went away. Right? So a combination of these things happen, and they happen at the same time.
And how does that work on a paying subscribers mindset?
That
right?
is the hardest part.
Right? Like, because people, like, I know there are a couple of things I'm like, yaar, ye kyun kiya? Acha tha yaar, ye band kyun kar
I was
diya?
devastated when BFO shut down.
Same actually.
See?
I was like, yaar, this is working
Might
well.
as well get all our customer grievances
might as
out of
well
the way.
actually. Who's going to write email to feedback@ken.com?
Yeah, that's hard. That is actually the hardest part. Like if we were just an individual creator, we could always kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
But this is the hardest part. But I think I would like to believe one of the things that we keep telling people and we keep reminding subscribers is that when we shut things down, we also start new things. And you have, hopefully by now, you have trusted us enough that whatever we start now is going to be as good and maybe better than what the pain that you felt when something shut down. And I'm not saying that happens, like, I don't know, I don't think for every single subscriber they feel that uniformly for every single product, because clearly you both feel very strongly about BFO. Okay, but I would like to believe that we replace that with other products. So even if you look at, say, even, and that's true, even when Rohin shut down First Principles yesterday, a lot of the emails, even publicly, the comments were, I understand, I'm very disappointed, but knowing the Ken,
They will.
I'm sure that they are coming up with something else, and I think that will be good.
And that's really the power of, building that trust or, brand in some way.
Yeah.
Like that authenticity and all that sort of thing. All those things that brands aspire to be is exactly that, right? What do, sorry, one person who I have worked with for a long time always describes a brand as, what do they say about you when you're not in the room?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people
great
would
thing
say,
to say,
about the Ken. Like, okay, they've shut this down, but
Yeah.
they'll replace it with something else.
I would like to believe, and I'll be honest and I'll say that it's not easy. It's a constant struggle. You don't necessarily get it right. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you have ups, you have downs, but you try, and that's how it is, right? You always try, and you try harder every time. That's all.
Now when I think of, so one is the entire stories, newsletters, podcast, style of what you do. The other is the entire learning vertical, right? Which works with corporates face to face.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very drastic shift from a technically how you look at products perspective. You're going from an online, I won't say mass produced, but still as the same story for everyone. Versus, I am sure when you go out and do your learning workshops, it is customized to some degree to the organization, what their needs are, and so on.
Yeah.
Right now, again, what is the thought behind that shift? Is it only because Ruhi said, "I want to do this"?
Yes. See, you got the pattern. That is exactly what happened. I was going to say that. See, you already understood how the Ken works. Okay. So the story is that Ruhi used to be a writer with the Ken. She was actually, and even today, she's one of India's most, accomplished healthcare journalists. Like she's done a bunch of stories on Ayushman Bharat, on the Aam Aadmi Party and the Mohalla clinics, written about several tech companies and health tech companies, done a bunch of this. And one fine day, Ruhi comes, I think probably like a month or two before COVID hits, saying that all of this is fine, but you know what, I want to take a break and I'm quitting because I want to write a book, right? Some fiction book she wanted to write. And we are like, of course, cool, all the best, Ruhi, do well. We gave a nice farewell. She wrote a nice farewell email. Everything went off. Around 6 months to a year later, she came back. And she was like, listen, the book and all, you leave the book. I mean, I've written something. Okay.
This is like PGK's second article, which Rohit never saw.
But Ruhi came back and Ruhi was like, book and all fine. I mean, book is going on. But you know what I did? In the last 6 to 9 months when I was like writing, I researched the hell out of story and story structures, right? And it's like my mind has like lit up. And I am so completely enamored by story structures and all of that. And I'm filled with all of this and I'm bursting with it and I want to teach it. Can I teach it? So her initial thing was, can I just teach it to maybe inside the can, maybe to like reporters and all that. And then of course we kept playing around and they were like, well, maybe we can do something bigger and better. And then we went ahead with this. That is how this happened. So the learning vertical was, again, we didn't do any customer research, any market research that said, oh, we need a learning vertical. Let's hire somebody. No, it was just because Ruhi, who used to be a writer, came and said, yeah, I want to do this. We're like, cool, let's figure out how to build a product around it. Right. And this is a story that I say, and we say the story whenever we do our workshops as well. This is one of the first stories that we say in the beginning. We say that when we introduce ourselves, say that this is me, this is Ruhi, this is the story of how this started, and this is how we do it. So this is a true story. This is exactly how it began.
One other thing I want to probably maybe zoom out a little from a writing or even any form of content is the entire thing about long form, right? And so there are two set of people you see, right? One set of long form creators say that people actually crave depth, people enjoy depth, they revel in it, and when they get something, they like to immerse themselves. Whereas then another part of the entire creator economy, which is there, which says that, listen, it's reels, it's shorts, it's this entire thing of 180 character takes on Twitter and stuff, and is what works and what gets you attention and so on. Now, given that in some form or the other, you are sort of committed to more long form, writing at the Ken, how are you expecting, and I'm not just talking about business journalism, this entire creator space, how are you seeing this two different paths go forward now? Both will exist.
Yeah.
I don't think neither of it is going to go away, but how do you expect this to evolve?
Okay, so I'm going to be biased, okay? Because obviously I am from the Ken. So I'm going to be biased towards long form, and I'm going to say long form rocks. So if I had a penny for the number of times I got emails from people saying that either during hiring or during interviews or doing anything saying that, and I would ask them, what would you like the Ken to do differently, or give us an idea that you would like us to do? And they always say stuff like variants of attention span is going down these days, so you should write more snackable, snippy, short content, and that'll be like really useful. And the only reason we don't do it, there are two reasons why we don't do anything, is that number one, we don't do it because there is no way how we can't visualize a way where we can write short form and still be distinctive. All of the stuff that you said or we discussed thus far, saying that, oh, the voice is very unique, the style is very unique, the headline is very unique, the thing is very unique. We cannot replicate that in a short form. It just cannot be done. We lose all of those advantages.
Here's a conflict over here. You say that, but at the same time, one of your guiding principles is that an entire story should be able to be summarized in a sentence or a word.
Yes.
And I love that conflict. I'm not asking for clarification, but that's a beautiful kind of conflict that kind of exists.
But that is needed for clarity.
Clarity, exactly.
That is very hard to do as a product. That's very different. So I'm not saying we will never do it. I'm just saying we just haven't figured out how to do that. Which is also the same reason, and this I'm going to drop a big bombshell now. Okay. This is also like, people are going to be really upset in the comment sections. Which is also the reason right now where we have never done video. Ever. Right? And we have very strong beliefs why we'll never do video. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's simply for that same reason. We don't know and we don't believe we can differentiate on video. We just absolutely don't. So there are two parts to it.
Yeah.
Part one is this, which is that can you do something in a way that allows you to stand out, be distinctive, and add some value in a different way? If you don't know, don't do it. Don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. We can't do it, right? We don't know how to do that with short form, so we don't do it. Can you do that with video? We haven't figured out yet how to do it. That's part one. Part two of it is that there's again a bias that we have. We are generally much more skeptical about anything where the distribution of it is algorithmic.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what I mean by that is, let's say for instance, all video distribution today is algorithmic, which means if I make a video, it's either on Reels or on YouTube or anything else, and the distribution and the way how people find out about it is largely driven through algorithms, right? That is not true about the Ken as a subscription publication, where the only way you find out about it is there's an email I sent to you. Your email is not that algorithmic. You get to know about it. I send you an email. Chances are you'll receive it, right? So you know about it. So it's a direct connection. Same with podcast. Podcast discovery is not that algorithmic.
Yeah.
You subscribe to a
It's
podcast.
actually not algorithmic almost at all.
Yeah.
Because
Other
it
than the
works
charts
on
part of it.
works on either your organic distribution or your recommendations from friends and family. That's how it usually works.
That is where we are very confident. Wherever there is organic, that's also the true about the Ken. Our marketing budget is zero. So I have been and I have met VCs who have asked, what's your CAC? And I say, it's zero. Like, because we don't spend on marketing. We have zero spend on marketing. All of our growth is completely driven by organic and by word of mouth. If it is organic and if it is word of mouth, I think I can win. That is why wherever we lose that advantage, we try not to go there.
Wow, okay.
Okay. So, long story short, I'm not going to give you an answer about my beliefs of how content forms will evolve, because honestly, I don't know. But I do know that if you are a part of something and you have some distinctiveness there, stick to it. And as long as you can be distinctive there, stick to it. And don't, because today short form content is fashionable and sexy, whether it is short text, short videos, etc. Tomorrow it will be something else. I don't know what it will be. Some AI generated, some holograms. I don't know what it is. Okay, so doesn't mean you all suddenly jump and do AI generated holograms tomorrow. So that's my general advice to anybody. Short or long is fine. If you think you can do well, do it well.
Yeah, I mean, just you saying that you don't know what might come in the future, it could just be a change. Like one idea that's been tossed around is to give control of the algorithm to users in some way by allowing users to pick the levers of what should constitute their content. And for example, I would then like to assume that folks like you, for example, if you ever do get into that space, will do well, because again, they are opting in. They're voluntarily opting in some way. I mean, you can make an argument that they opt in for anyone who they follow.
Yeah, but I don't think, Chuck, that thing is going to happen. I mean,
Sure,
like, I
sure.
mean, I understand
that's
what
just
you're
a random
saying.
idea, yeah.
No. I get what you're saying. I'm saying that, again, this is my product hat. Okay,
Sure,
nothing
sure.
else. Okay, my product hat says that there is always a belief that people think that users want more options.
Sure.
And the more options
of
you
course.
give them, the
Yeah.
better
Yeah.
they're going
I
to
see
have.
the other Steve Jobs quote coming.
No. So I mean, yeah,
Also a choice paradox, right?
it's a
I
choice
mean,
paradox as well,
yeah.
right? And so I don't think that's going to happen. And I think users hate those.
All right, fair enough. Yeah. One question I have is on Nutgraph itself. Highly entertaining user, probably the product I consume the most from the Ken. I absolutely I absolutely love it. I have to say, it is an absolute delight to read every weekend. And one of the things that stands out to me in that newsletter is how you are able to bring references from various worlds almost into the same kind of place, right? Yesterday, when we were speaking to let's call him a musician, come quizzer, come like I think we know who we are talking about.
Yeah, you and I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Bertie told us was that all these different worlds just come together when he does quizzing, because now he's able to take a fact that he knows from his science and contextualize that in a way using pop culture, making it interesting, and that makes for a great quiz question. And I've always thought that the Ken was something, the Nutgraph specifically was something like that, where you're able to, like, sometimes I was like, why are you talking about this, right? And by this, it could still be business, but why are you talking about, say, something that happened in the 1850s or whatever? You have drawn historical parallels and then use that to talk about, say, process engineering or whatever the case may be. I mean, I don't have a well-structured question for this, but is this something that you find that your various interests or reading that you have done back in the day have finally now compounded and found a kind of outlet? I don't think it's something that can be manufactured in a very short period of time. It is a curious mind joining the dots in some way, right?
Yeah, I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. But there is a second part to the story which I'll tell for the first time. So the first part of the story is this, which is that the way I'm able to do this, and the reason why I do this, is also because I grew up in the Gulf, in the Middle East, just like our friend here. Okay,
Young times.
And young times and all. But the thing is that I would come to India once every 2 years, right? And the place where I stayed, unlike him, was this really, really small town in the Gulf, right? It's not Abu Dhabi, it's not Dubai, it's this tiny town. And the story that I say is it's a town that had like 17 KFCs and no bookshops. right? There are absolutely no bookshops there. There are no such thing as bookshops over there. So what I would do is I would come to India once every 2 years, and my dad would basically take me to Bangalore, Higginbotham's, and say, you can pick 15 books, right? That's it. And I have to pick those 15 books, not just for money reasons, but also space reasons. You can't just carry more than 15 books back. Okay. So I had to pick those 15 books, and I would take those 15 books and I would read those 15 books for 2 years, right? So for 2 years, I'm reading and rereading 15 books, right? And when you start reading and rereading the same book over and over again, all kinds of connections and things.
We were just speaking about this yesterday with somebody
20
else.
Archie comics?
Yeah, 20 Archie comics in my case. And I was speaking about how I had interviewed a famous cricket journalist. And he was talking about exactly the same thing, where he didn't have cable access or whatever growing up in the 80s, 90s. He would memorize the scorecards again and again. And again, just like you said, make connections. Oh, I noticed that this batsman is getting out in this way.
Exactly.
And then the joy of figuring that out on your own without,
Exactly.
analysis. I'm assuming it's something like that. And I get where you're
So I
coming
would
from.
keep rereading.
Yeah.
And the other thing that my school did, one of the few good things that my school did was whenever you would do well in school or whenever you get those proficiency first grade, first prize, second prize, they wouldn't give me a trophy. They would give like a couple of books, right? Of course, they would select really random books and give it to me. So I'm like 4th standard, I'm getting the unabridged works of Rudyard Kipling. Okay. And I'm like, okay, so let's find out what's going on here. So those kind of stuff would happen. So because of all that rereading, you start to see connections a lot, right? And you start to understand story structures a lot. And you start to understand history and all of these other things a little bit well. Some things I know really, really well and deeply. Other things I know nothing about. So when I started writing the Nut Graph, I was actually leaning on to that. That's what you're talking about. You're saying, oh, there's this historical thing. There's this thing that you spoke about. And I used to do a little bit of quizzing as well. So those things I did. I have stopped doing that. I have reduced doing that rather. The reason I've reduced doing that is because I have always, over time I started to understand and believe that what's more interesting is not that. What's more interesting is the stuff that I have done myself. And I've started to lean onto that a little bit more.
Notice that, actually,
right?
Yeah.
And that is just a function of confidence. And it's a function of, honestly, when you're in a newsroom, one of the things that you're always told in a directive principle thing, which we also stick to some extent, is never make yourself the story. You are not the story. You're talking about something else. It's not about you, which is true. And there's good reason to stick to that. But suddenly off late, at least for the last year or two, I started realizing that there are some things that when I see it and I realize that, something that I have done or I have seen or I have experienced is very, very unique. And that perspective, I have to bring it out and I have to say it, right? And this comes out in many ways. So for instance, I'll give an example. So this happened one of the first few times this happened was around a couple of years back, because you guys are new to Bangalore. Oh, no, not you, of course. You are new to Bangalore. Bangalore, and it was hard to believe, but Bangalore was flooded. Okay, we had floods over here, and some of these people know. So they were basically like, it takes a lot of work to take a city that is like literally like high up in the mountains underwater. It takes a lot of work. Okay, and our city did that. Okay, our city was exceptional at it.
Spirit of Bangalore.
Spirit of Bangalore. We basically drowned the city, right? Yeah. Now, when we drowned the city, at that point in time, everyone wrote about, oh my God, this thing, civic infrastructure, etc., etc. So my perspective is very different. So I actually wrote an edition of the Nut Graph where I wrote about the Bangalore floods, but I started it with a red overhead crossing. And it's a red overhead pedestrian crossing that I would cross every day on my way to work after Silkport towards the InMobi office. And it is to this day, it is there on the outer ring road, right? So when you go that place, there is a red pedestrian crossing because crossing that road was next to very, very difficult. Yeah. So all these companies...
This is one that companies kind of
financed and built out. Almost outsourced and built it out.
Crowdsourced
and built out. That's exactly what it is. So that is the story of infrastructure development in Bangalore. So now you can tell that story. And only I know that story because I know what it feels like to cross that road and what happened. And that I combined with... So my wife is a political theorist. She teaches political theory. So thanks to her, I have learned a lot about humanities and political theory. The stuff that engineering students and MBA students like me never get to learn, right? Just because I'm with her. So now I see that as well. And somehow I'm in this weird place. I realize that I'm sitting on one side where I have access and I understand this entire part about science and technology and MBA and products and all of these things. But on the other hand, I have this other ocean of knowledge, which I don't know well, but I know a little bit about. And somehow I see I'm the only person standing at the intersection of both of them. Yeah. And now if I'm here, then my responsibility in storytelling, why am I talking about some 1850s, some historical event?
Yeah.
I should be talking about this. This is more important and this is more relevant than that.
And more interesting in
And
some
more
way,
interesting. But that comes with time.
right? Yeah.
Right? So that has started happening more, right, of late. So when I write about, say, the Great Wall of Fashion, I can write about a lot of things about the history of textiles. But it's far more interesting to say that I was the first product manager at Myntra. And let me tell you how that matters with fashion today.
Yeah.
Right? I wrote something on, so I'm sitting and talking to you. We none of us have read it. I wrote a piece today about product managers, right? It's far more interesting. I could have gone and spoken about Marissa Mayer and Google and all of that, which I touch upon a little bit. But it's far more interesting to talk about, let me tell you about product management, because let me explain to you from my perspective what this whole thing is. So that has started happening more. And I think creators in general, maybe it's more easier for creators to do that because they lean on to their own experiences. It's harder from a journalism standpoint because that is the part that I had to surmount. I've been writing for almost 5 years. It's only now that I've become much more comfortable with it.
Yeah. But no, one very interesting thing over there, and the most interesting word that you used over there for me was intersection. And I suppose it's kind of like a cliche, but here's what I hope people get out of this. Like, we've been speaking for about an hour right now. And with all due respect to everything that you've done, there's nothing extraordinary as such in the past, right? You were a regular guy with lots of different kind of interests. You read a lot, all that sort of thing. And
how dare you?
No, yeah,
This is after like 1 hour, you're insulting 1.5 hours.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, I'm
it's still less than the time you spent at Silport Junction.
Yeah,
That's
sure,
true. Okay. You see, if you had insulted me in the beginning, I could have left.
Yeah,
Now
I
you're
would have
insulting me at the end. Now I can't leave
Yeah.
also.
Now you are invested.
Yeah, now it's
and there's
recorded.
traffic on the way back also, so you might as well stay
Fine,
over here.
continue insulting.
No, the point I'm trying to make is, like, everybody finds themselves at some intersection, right? And some of them we've noticed kind of they're leaning into the past experience is one thing, but leaning into the intersection or even trying to figure out what that intersection is, I think that's the more interesting kind of space, right? Like, there's an obvious background. Yeah, I'm a product manager, or yeah, I have been through this certain kind of experience.
Yeah.
But sure, okay, with all many people might have gone through that. What am I in a unique position to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, it could be because of the space that I am in right now, right? Maybe I might be the only person from India who's done this, who now happens to be, say, in Montreal, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think those, like, we call it category of one in some ways, but it's really about that. Like, when you were saying all of that, yeah, I have one side of me is all this, and then this is entire new world which I'm not an expert in. And I loved that you said that I'm not an expert and I'm trying to figure it out. It's a new thing that's open to me, and I find out I'm the only person who is in that intersection, and possibly to do an even deeper intersection is in a position to actually create something out of that.
Correct.
I think that is beautiful. Like, no question over here, just an observation, really. Like, maybe find your intersection, I suppose, is one very broad.
Yeah. I think, see, I'll just say one last comment, which is that on this topic, which is that I think a lot of people, when they talk about story, again, we teach this. We say people always worry about story.
Yeah.
They worry about story structure. They worry about story emotion, story conflict, etc. We say that there are always three things. There is story, there is audience, and there is storyteller. The storyteller part is the one that is the most misunderstood, right? Because if you look at, say, companies after companies, where they basically try to tell their story, where CEOs, everything, etc., everybody keeps the storyteller out. Right?
Yeah.
The Economist, very famously, does not even have the names
The
of
name of the
journalists,
author,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No bylines, right? Why? Because they believe that is not needed, right? But the storyteller is so important. And the thing that makes storytellers unique is something that all of them have to lean on to. The reason why I was able to tell that story, you're right, I'm not an expert there, but I knew enough, thanks to my wife, that I can talk intelligently about this very interesting thing called the politics of objects, which is what the whole thing was about. I was like, do objects inherently in themselves have political properties? And that is a very strange construct.
Yeah.
People can't even describe it. Even I don't think I understand it very well, but I understood it just well enough to be able to write it.
Yeah.
And I could understand it, and I understood just well enough to be able to write it at that point in time, at this place, in this city that I have lived in when I was going under that bridge.
Yeah.
And all of those things had to come together. And I just have to keep an eye out and see it. That's all it is.
No, and I think what you brilliantly bring out, and I want to say this specifically because one, we are recording this in Bangalore, and I work at a tech company. You have worked at a tech company.
The same tech company.
The same tech company.
What are the odds, guys? Okay, in Bangalore.
Right? And because there is this sense of, techno optimism, which we come with, that technology will solve all problems.
Yeah.
But I read this brilliant article in this magazine called Nautilus, which says that technology has a culture blind spot.
Yes.
Right? And I think this is probably one of the biggest reasons why technocrats need to have liberal arts education.
Absolutely.
To be able to make that bridge and not have that blind spot.
Absolutely.
And when I think back of what Bertie was saying, right, about quizzing, history, and science, I'm saying the entire thing of saying that these are different worlds is an old construct.
Yeah.
For him, it is one world.
Yeah.
For you, that intersection is one world. And who are we to say that these are crossovers? No, this is one world.
This is one world.
And the moment you start thinking of it as one world, you are far less worried about, oh, does this make sense? Is this a right crossover? Does this insight translate into that? No, it is just one world in my head, and that's how I'm telling the story.
Yeah, I agree. It is one world in my head.
In your head,
many
right?
ways, it is one world.
And I think that is also a mental barrier which we need to break out of as whatever sort of creators we are in any form.
Yeah.
That there are no multiple worlds. There's only one world which is in your head.
Yes. And I think that the only lesson that I would give is that people will find a lot of initial success in a bubble, right? So what I mean by that is, especially if you're a creator,
yeah.
you'll always get an initial bunch of success by writing to the audience that looks and sounds exactly like you and believes what you do.
Yeah.
That is always going to happen, regardless of whichever kind of a creator you are, right? But the truly great ones and the truly extraordinary ones, all across history, we have seen this, are the ones whom, at a certain point in time, the set of people whom they've always created for turn back and say, what is this? We didn't expect this from you. We don't like it anymore. Right? And if you don't have enough people saying we don't like it anymore, this is different from what you used to do, then you're probably not taking all the worlds that you can encompass.
Yeah.
And there are so many examples
so
that
many
Chuck and I have spoken about, especially with respect to music.
Yeah, Metallica's fifth album. There we go.
Sure. Like if you look at the Beatles, every album is completely different. We spent an entire night talking about the Beatles. All right. We spent several hours talking about every album of the Beatles. Well, mostly Chuck talking, me listening. But if you
That
look
sounds about right.
Yeah. I was listening to this podcast called History of Rock in 500 Songs, right? Which is a fantastic podcast because suddenly I start to understand what Bob Dylan really meant and how much, he actually really subverted things again and again and again and again. So the greatest creators do that. You'll always get an initial success, but the truly great ones break out of it.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a great point for us to sort of wrap this up, that the greatest creators are never a victim of their success. They just take it as a pedestal to, move ahead. And the way I like to think about it is that your previous creator self hands over the baton to your next creator self.
Absolutely.
Right. And your previous creator self has to exist for it to hand it over to the next one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe the last question from my side is, have you ever thought of, and I'm not joking when I say this, but have you ever thought of reviving the thing that started this entire thing off, which is the drawings again?
Yeah, I do. But I don't think I do the stick figures in such a big way. You know what? I have a very practical problem. Okay. My practical
You
problem.
don't have a Wacom.
No, yes, I don't have a
There we
Wacom.
go.
That is the thing. It's actually a practical problem. My practical problem is I don't have a Wacom and I don't want to buy an iPad.
So this problem will be solved the next time I come to Bangalore because I literally have a Wacom which I don't use anymore, and I would love for it to be, as long as you promise to insert Easter eggs in there.
Nice. We will talk about Easter eggs and I'll put one nice postcards from nowhere somewhere in the middle. I'll put a 6% somewhere in the middle. Someone's jersey, there'll be a 6%.
There are
at the corner.
6% Easter eggs in the surface area of this particular sketch.
Wow.
Correct.
Okay, you've gone to a
Done.
level which-
Clearly, we should stop this conversation now. It's going into...
But the best part about Easter eggs is anything can be an Easter egg. Why are there 6 people here on this post?
Ah.
Awesome. Thank you, Peach, for coming on once again.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun. It is really nice to always talk about things that
The
you love and
process.
enjoy and do every day with people whom you really like and enjoy and love every day. I just want to say also all the best to everything that you guys are doing. I think what you guys are doing is fantastic.
Thank you.
I think people need to be taught and learn that creation is something that can happen in a community. And I think there are many fundamental rules, and I can't think of any 2 people better than the 2 of you to be able to
Thank
teach
you.
that.
It's very kind.
No, it's true. It's always true.
Thank you. Let's
Thank
dive
you.
in.
Let's dive in. Thank you.